Check 1 2. Check. It is Tuesday, and on King Street East, it is also Beer Day as the massive beer trucks, like an army, just storm the sidewalks, dropping off those massive kegs. Guess what? They don't necessarily care about your safety either, as I found out. They're like gladiators with kegs out there. A little bit of the nasty going on. Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk to John Q. Gale. He is a lawyer from Hartford who is figuring out a way on how to bring the Hartford Whalers back. The interesting take on this, it involves taxpayers' money. He's also a lawyer, and he's on the city council. And he figures somewhere in the nature of, what, $246, give or take. If they cough that up, they would be able to afford to bring the Whalers back to Hartford, thus removing them from Carolina. And when you think about it, Carolina actually has a Stanley Cup. They have a Stanley Cup. And right now, in most categories, Dave, they're pretty much a zero or last, including in attendance. It's just, culturally, I don't know if it ever was a success down there. But, did they have some good teams? Yeah, they had some good teams, but are they viable now in this market? Well, I guess you could argue that they're not. And if they're truly not going to be viable, does that make them more viable if they go back to Hartford?
The one argument people will sit there and say, wait a second, before Hartford comes about, what about Quebec City? Quebec City has the actual stadium itself ready to play. They're good to go. A lot of people thought Quebec would be part of this expansion when we talked about Las Vegas. That did not happen this time around. So would I like to see a team in Hartford? Yeah, I would. I really would. Would I like to see a team in Quebec? Absolutely. Because those two markets seem to be hockey style of markets where Carolina kind of, they took advantage of a nice team, a nice run. They got their Stanley Cup. If they're not in the Stanley Cup, it almost seems like this city wasn't really interested in NHL hockey.
There are some who feel quite the opposite because of that love for Quebec. Our good friend Chris May, who you'd see on the Weather Network, he's the tall guy who also, and people, I don't mind saying this out loud, if you watched Billy Madison, when Billy Madison used to talk about, hello, Swan. I see you, Swan. In the Giant Penguin?
Yep.
Chris May. And don't lie about it, Chris May from the Weather Network. That was you in the Penguin outfit because they shot it in Canada. Apparently the uniform or the mascot did not smell that good after a couple of hours. Chris May says, doesn't even move the needle for me. Hashtag Nordiques first. He goes, really, Connecticut. Here's another one from Chris. Says, nostalgia, love the whale. Also blew my mind the first time someone pointed out there was a H in the logo as well as the W. I believe Reebok says it's still one of their better selling jerseys. Here's Jeff Harding saying still one of the best logos / unis in sports. And here's a really interesting one from Coach Frank saying, and once again, if you want to get in the conversation today, Twitter, I'm at Raw Mike Richards, at David Bastel.
So you said Coach Frank had an interesting tweet?
He does.
See, that doesn't happen often.
Yeah,
that's good.
So he's breaking the mold.
Good for him.
He said, same feeling for me when Winnipeg came back. As long as they are called the Whalers and come back with the same logo, it would be accepted. Because as we know, that's not always the case. But I couldn't imagine anything other than the Whalers in that area. And, of course, there's a couple of other people who bring up some good points like, if you're in the East Coast, then geographically, that's another team that you'd be able to see, and they would head down. So, so far, there seem to be a lot of people looking forward to the Whalers, but there are those in the breads not circuses kind of camp who feel that, should taxpayers and the locals in that area cough up the, $250 some odd dollars, per person, and that's what the average has been figured out to be, that would get them back in the region, in the city. Now, John Q. Gale, who's a lawyer and again on the council of the city of Hartford, is going to say, when you look at what we're going through economically in central Connecticut, we need something. And to boot, also, what would you say, an emotional, how do they put it?
Investing in the emotional well-being of our community. That's what a sports team does. And we're not just talking about the Whalers. We're talking about, and don't get us wrong here, Hartford isn't exactly a heavyweight city when it comes to the eastern United States compared to what's surrounded by them. But having that Whalers franchise meant something to a lot of people. It really did.
Well, apparently it still does. So we'll find out later on in the show. We'll get a call from John Q. Gale. Looking at last night in the National Hockey League, aside from the stunning nature of the score itself, Washington taking out Pittsburgh in a game that was a clincher. The so-called chokers did not. In fact, if anyone choked last night, it was the Penguins.
It's completely the Penguins. They weren't even involved in the game. There was a lot of no-shows and kind of left the goaltender out to dry. This was the Capitals' game from start to finish. They took advantage of it, and now they force that Game 7, and that Game 7 where traditionally the Capitals don't do well. But is this a turning point for this franchise? Because if they can get by this game, if they advance, Mike, the path is there. The path is there to that next level, and they should be able to get past the conference because it's almost like it's getting a little bit easier for them. The Rangers or Senators are substantially not as good as the Pittsburgh Penguins.
18 shots on goal by Pittsburgh.
That's a no-show.
In a clinching game. So they go back.
Virtual reality
here's something else. We're having all kinds of things today. What is this?
Experience
sorry, it's an advertisement on the computer. And now it won't turn off. There we go. Speaking of things that we'd like to see and can't, last night Sidney Crosby goes down, cleared to play. In fact, he goes into the boards at one point and doesn't even miss a shift. So,
and it was head first, and it looked kind of nasty.
It was head first.
He kind of sat there, and you went, "Geez,
let's go to Mike Vision. We can't show you the actual clip, but here's how it looked.
Mike Vision.
And here's Crosby. He's going in on goal. Here comes a player from behind. He doesn't see him. Oh, there's a push. The referee blowing the whistle, and Crosby's down. And look at that. Oh, baby. You can tell he's hurt by the X's on his eyes. And I got to tell you, the crowd doesn't like it. They don't like it one bit. I'm pretty sure Crosby not pleased with that artist rendering either. Kind of a shit drawing and a real bad representation. But thanks, NHL, because we can't show the real clips. Douchebags. Well, there it is. Once again, that's some excitement from last night. What did you make of that play?
The X's on the eye show that Crosby was hurt on the play. And you kind of sit there and you go, how was he not evaluated when the trainer comes out and sees the X's on his eyes and goes, okay, we have to hold you back. But I mean, they did test their star player. You're not gonna just let him go out there and play. So with or without X's on the eye, he seemed to be okay. I hope he is this morning as well, because sometimes the morning after is rougher than what actually happened the night before.
Well, I think they're just going to get a rough ride either way. For the first time in this series, I'm actually thinking that Washington should be favored at home. I get the superstition that you'd have if you were a Caps fan, but I'm kind of thinking if anything looks even remotely similar to what we saw last night, the Capitals could actually be moving on. And for some people, the biggest problem with that is they don't like Ovi. They don't want Alexander Ovechkin going on. If people just sort of relish the fact that they think he's a douchebag, they think he's a dirty player. But is he more than that? Of course he's more than that. And would you like him on your team? You wouldn't, Dave.
Sometimes.
Controversial. That is controversial.
Well, the thing is, it's, and we've talked about this before with other examples of other players in other sports where I don't know how much the public would sit there and back an Ovechkin Stanley Cup. A lot of times you make the argument going, I hope so-and-so wins because I'd like to see them win the Stanley Cup. I bet you it's 50-50 with Alex Ovechkin.
I think it's certainly not better than 50-50. Certainly not better than 50-50. Looking at more tiers, if you want to put it the way. I don't think they really were, but honestly, the garbage bag day, whatever you want to call it, for the Toronto Raptors.
Unfortunately,
they had a lot of the exit interviews as well, and of course they're going to face the media as well.
You think they do better than garbage bags, eh? millionaires in garbage bags. I don't know. Maybe like nice big suitcases.
It's always nice to save money, I find. And I wonder if that's what the Raptors are going to want to do when it comes to Kyle Lowry. Now, of course, the question of the day is he hanging around? What does he think management will do? Well, he doesn't know. He's not going to answer. I don't know what you expect him to say, but they did ask that question yesterday.
Me and Coach have had our ups, we've had our downs, we've had our ups, we've had our downs, but it's been great. Coach Casey has allowed me to become a 3-time All-Star. He's helped me become that. He's allowed me to be the player I've become. He allowed me to have a voice. He's allowed me to grow. He's allowed me a lot of things. So, in that sense, he's been great to me. Of course, we're going to butt heads. I think most point guards and coaches butt heads because they want to be better. They want to push each other to be better. But he's helped me tremendously. He's let me be me. He's let me grow to become a leader, a better man, a better basketball player. So, he's always been in my corner. He's always had my back. So, at the end of the day, I think me and his relationship it's grown from, here to here.
That's Kyle Lowry talking about his relationship. But do you notice in that particular statement that everything was in the past tense? Helped, not he helps me, or it has been.
The only thing he was missing was, I'm going to miss the city of Toronto and Dwayne Casey and Masai Ujiri. They really helped me get to this next step, and I'm really happy to be part of the Philadelphia 76ers organization, and I look forward to a 40 win season in a couple of years.
And what we didn't show you, what you didn't hear, is the fact that he said, I have been traded before. I've been traded before. So it's that inference of, I think that they're probably not going to return, but being on the other side of 30, being in the physical condition that he is, and again, it will be a very painful one for Raptor fans, for a guy who's given his all. But if you think that moving the franchise ahead sort of is reliant on LeBron either getting hurt or aging, because he's going to be in Cleveland maybe forever, who's to say? But you're not going to wait until he becomes less of a player, and that's not the way they run the organization. And I'll be honest, I don't think Masai Ujiri is that kind of guy. So expect there to be moves to be made. And I also think that it might be Serge Ibaka might become the guy that they really want to sign, make sure that it is signed up for next year. That's my opinion anyway. Here's Bruno. If you get a chance to go to either YouTube later today or right on the website, rawmikeRichards.com, and take a look at the highlights from that Sidney Crosby crash behind the goal. Bruno
you can't get that anywhere else.
Well, he said that Crosby into the boards highlight burst a blood vessel. Oh, baby. Can you do it again? No. We only had one artist at the time. He's very expensive, and as you can tell by the quality of the drawings,
he's out the door. Yeah.
He couldn't do the Kyle Lowry, which is really quite a shame. Speaking of a shame, I've been complaining that I did not drop huge coin every game on the Cavs. Why did we not drop huge money on Eugenie Bouchard? Why did we do that?
It would have been amazing money too.
And it was
paying over a 520.
520 is what the number was. And I, for as gorgeous as Maria Sharapova is, the sound she makes when she hits the ball, I think there's really only so much I can take. Here's just a clip of Eugenie Bouchard not only calling Maria Sharapova, previously, as you know, a cheater. She actually wipes her off the court here. Sounds good, though, doesn't it? Yeah.
She has done it. What a statement victory that is for Ginny Bouchard.
Yes.
You're going to have to remember this match when you put together the best matches of 2017, because that's going to be right up there for
nice
almost
handshake.
3 hours. Ginny Bouchard and Maria Sharapova have delighted this crowd here in Madrid.
What do they really said? What do you think they were really saying? Bitch, cheater, fuck off. Like it might be one of those. Like honestly, that was courtesy of WTA, as that was from Madrid, apparently is where they played. But rarely do you see a Canadian say the things that she did and then go out and crush her. Like she crushed her.
Post game, she talked about Sharapova's, and this is her words, not mine, quote unquote, so-called comeback.
Ooh, so she's just
Oh yeah.
Those are dangerous words, though.
Big time. It's almost like Ortiz versus Shamrock, where Ortiz wins, and then he pretends to sit in the middle of the ring digging a shovel for Shamrock's grave, and people just lit up. Oh, that was fantastic.
Ortiz and Shamrock. I did not see that parallel. But now that you mention it, maybe it is very, very similar.
I wanted to see Bouchard sit there and start digging a grave for Sharapova, and then do the old Undertaker, and I think that would have been strong.
Also, those that got wiped out. If you want to put okay, look, it's sort of a recapping of those that failed. So Pittsburgh was in that category. Maria Sharapova was in that category. And if you're wondering about the Utah Jazz, they were at least in that category. They got destroyed, maybe not surprisingly, by the team that just looks like they're going to roll, depending on how you see Cleveland. But when you look at Golden State, very often you're going to want to talk about, the Splash Brothers, the Splash Twins. You want to talk about the threes. But when they get running, when they start playing with pace, they'll run you off the floor, and that's exactly what they did against Utah last night.
They get Hood and Hayward. Green flying down the floor on the other end, gives it up. Here's Durant. What a pass there, and that's Green. Knocks it away. Curry moving it. Curry all the way in. Easy to the rims. Pulls down the board, trying to take it all the way. Durant will. Misses the layup, but there to put his up to the first quarter. Did not score. Exum finds Johnson. Johnson working in the paint. And finally gets one to go. Come on. I mean, one pops up, and you just...
Yeah, so it was all over by the half. It really didn't matter, and there's a complete blowout. Now, the games that have not been all that engaging, I saw on Twitter, our good friend Sean Salisbury said, this is boring. He goes, the basketball right now is boring. He goes, too bad there's not a hockey game to watch. Although I would argue last night the Washington game wasn't exactly one for the ages either.
No.
And in that, it's funny. You see Draymond Green and Kevin Durant. This is, again, courtesy of NBA TV, where they are asked the question about other series because they made a crack about the Cleveland series not being that great. And, of course, the hilarity spawned on by Kevin Durant by pretending to sleep during the postgame.
You were talking about that you thought the Cleveland series was kind of boring, and I guess tonight on TNT, the guys were complaining that your series was boring too, and that basketball playoffs are boring, and these two dominant teams on a collision course. What do you think about that?
Blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's not boring. This team continued to fight. I think the way this team was fought, throughout this entire series, I think it was good basketball. They continue to execute their offense. They continue to compete on the defensive end.
Sure. Very close.
That was just my opinion. I don't expect everybody's opinion to be the same as mine. I think Cleveland's been playing great basketball. You watch them. It's been amazing.
Here comes the slam, though. Here it comes.
And then you watch other teams that they're playing against.
Oops.
Not so much.
Yeah.
So I that's just my opinion, though. But whatever. Who cares?
Yeah.
You're not allowed to have an opinion, Draymond. You're just supposed to play basketball, all right?
True. Sorry.
Yeah. So there it is. I mean, and again, I don't know how engaging a lot of these series are going to be, Dave. The other one's playing so well, but that wasn't even a series. And look, we talked about what Toronto was going to do in the future. And I mean, these are such dominant teams. But I have to admit, in other sports, where there is some kind of domination, do you just really not try? Do you give up? You can't sit there just because you're in the Western Conference, and if you're San Antonio or you're Portland or you're any of the teams that feel that they got to get better, they have to try something. They can't just roll over, because the way they talk in the East, as long as LeBron's playing for Cleveland and they have the team they do, is to just wait it out. And that's ridiculous to me.
Yeah, that is. And even to think that, and LeBron's going to be there for a while too. That's a sad part. So I'm hoping, teams like the Celtics, the Wizards, the Milwaukee Bucks, give them some sort of run in the next year or two, because I don't think it's going to be the Toronto Raptors. I don't think it's going to be the Atlanta Hawks. The Pacers are probably going to lose their star player this year in offseason as well. So I'm curious to see what the Kyle Lowry replacement is, because there will be a replacement. I'm just wondering to what level.
I just think that if you want to save some money and you go after someone like Serge Ibaka, if that becomes a priority, Can I not find, and again, not to immediately replace in the emotional side, because that's what the fans are going to think about, a point guard that can distribute that ball, that can run the offense? Does that mean, too, that so-called chemistry that he has with DeMar DeRozan, because he got all that kind of cash, if you bring in someone else, does that hurt his performance? Are there no point guards out there that would come in and suffice that need? Because I think you can find a point. I think you can find a point guard.
I think you can too, and maybe it might be one of those situations where maybe it's not to the same level of Kyle Lowry, but that means that DeMar maybe takes another step in progression as far as, it being his team. Because sometimes when you're splitting with another player and a lot of people going, okay, this is Kyle's team, this is DeMar's, we're not sure exactly. If you have the one king of the kingdom, sometimes it works better when everybody kind of knows their job and their position on this roster. Maybe it's a positive before it's a negative.
Well, I don't discount that. Again, that comes down to sort of character, so we'll find out with the Toronto Raptors. If you're watching this morning, it is Raw Mike Richards on rawmike.richards.com or the dedicated YouTube channel brought to you by Henry's Cameras, Canada's camera store, Abbey Studios, who put together our website, and, of course, our good friends at Eggplant Studios, Eggplant Pictures. And we're looking forward to, probably in about 10 minutes or so, we'll talk to John Q. Gale from the Hartford City Council, also a lawyer, who said there are ways to get the Hartford Whalers back. Looking at some of your tweets here this morning, if you're communicating with us today, it's a Twitter account at Raw Mike Richards or at Dave Bastel. Do you want to see the Whalers back? Because, again, it brings up a couple of things. Number one, is that the best use of taxpayers' money? Is that how the area around Hartford's going to feel? Or is it the other way around? And then you also get a group saying, if that's coming back, where the Nordique? I mean, how old is that building that they put in there in Quebec City?
Year old.
Yeah, because it's almost brand new.
They were ready to go this year if they were ready to drop the puck on the season. They were ready to go for possible expansion with Vegas. Vegas ended up getting the only expansion nod. I mean, it's sitting there. It's a similar situation than what we saw with the Winnipeg Jets, where they had the downtown arena at the MTS Center waiting for a franchise to go drop. You don't have to build. You don't have to do anything like that. I think the situation in Hartford is maybe in the short term they could use their facility, but they'd probably have to build some sort of building. Maybe we'll ask John the same question. I don't know how much he knows about that, but would they be ready if they ended up buying this team in the off season and started the new year in Hartford? I think that's a little fast, but stranger things have happened.
Well, look, selfishly, if I'm taking a look at which place would I rather visit, I mean, Hartford or Quebec City, I know which one I'm going to. By the way, looking at, I'm always curious when certain players come back to a market where they were popular, what that reaction is going to be. And I think for the most part, you can kind of figure it out a little bit. For Edwin Encarnacion, when he comes back to play the Blue Jays, and again, it seems like you've got a team in Toronto that's sort of like Cleveland, and then you got Cleveland is sort of like Toronto Light. I don't know, or the other way around. There's interchangeable parts with players and, of course, management. So what was going to happen last night? While Edwin gets to his first at-bat, the sound from the Rogers Center, and actually courtesy of Fox Sports Ohio. And it's pretty good ovation. I mean, I think a lot of people were standing, as you can see, for those watching here on the show. If you want to listen to the podcast first and then go back and watch the video, if you did not see it last night. It's got to be weird, too, for Stroman to be pitching to, as they like to call him, Eddie. But is he deserving of that kind of ovation?
100%, yes.
I thought there were times where his back must be hurting from carrying that team because, honestly, as much as we talked about Jose Bautista, do you think they're even in any of those conversations when it came to, American League championships if Edwin isn't doing what he did?
It was 100% his, especially the last number of years. And you kind of look at the consistency of the 8 seasons. He came into the Blue Jays organization as a throwaway piece because the Cincinnati Reds were dumping him in that Scott Rowland trade, and he's turned out to be one of the best trades in Blue Jay history. just production and everything that he's brought. I think he's well liked as far as personality. He kind of has that, that no ego approach where he was never beating his chest or coming out and saying something stupid in the media. There wasn't anything controversial about him, and overall, I mean, there's a lot of massive home runs this guy hit. Maybe none bigger than that wild card game against the Baltimore Orioles, and it's too bad things couldn't work out. But players move on, and they'll continue to.
Certain expectations, and after we saw what Cleveland did in the playoffs last year, the Indians right now a little above 500, but honestly, in the American League, that is almost the entire division. You've got Cleveland, Minnesota, Chicago, and Detroit basically all within a game and a half each other. Kansas City has sort of decided to be a no-show this year, but I don't think that's a surprise. This was, in the rotation, again, we talked about it, the potential of where they are in their cycle. This is the low cycle for Kansas City. It is the way that, they're going to spend to possibly get back in it. But you could be talking about 2-3 years, Dave, before Kansas City gets back into that conversation.
Might be even longer
Or
than
even
that
longer,
because
okay.
I think they're going to be big-time sellers just this year itself. Maybe it might be a cool idea to get Rex Hudler on the show. And talk
He's
about,
awesome. You kidding? We love him.
Because he would come on the show and he'll be open and honest about this, where Kansas City is going to start dumping some of these contracts, some of these players, and build. And it might take 6-7 years before we see the Royals back in some sort of contention. But right now, I have the Royals pegged to be the worst team in the American League when everything's said and done.
Well, if we're taking a look, and again, we are so early. We're talking 30 games in. You're barely into the season. But if we're looking at some trends, the Yankees, I don't think, are going to play on this clip right now. They're just playing out of their minds. Cleveland, you have to figure at some point, is also going to probably pick it up a little bit. It will even out. But is it fair to say that those that are leading, so if I'm looking at a Cleveland, a New York, and I guess I still would put the Astros in that category.
I would put the Astros there.
Because maybe in terms of looking at the early trend, those teams should not be surprising. And again, I think probably the Yankees, as we talked about the other day, are going to have quite a future in front of them. But the Texas Rangers, they were not supposed to be sucking wind like they're doing right now.
That might be the biggest disappointment outside of the Toronto Blue Jays this year, because both the Blue Jays and the Rangers probably make pretty good arguments that they should be part of a playoff picture, at least, right? If not the wild card, a division title. I thought Houston and Texas would go right down to the wire, and it seems to be a wash away. I mean, Texas is already 8.5 games back at Houston. It's not even really remotely close. Some of the other disappointments really quick. Boston Red Sox being a couple games over 500. Wasn't expecting that. The Minnesota Twins are a pleasant surprise because they're over 500. The White Sox at 500 is a massive surprise. I thought they would flirt with the bottom of the basement in the American League. And you know what? Baltimore's a little bit of a surprise too, because right now Baltimore, for their money, is the second best team in the American League. I didn't think they would be there.
We're moments away. We're going to get a hold of John Q. Gale, calling in from the Hartford City Council, once again a lawyer in that area, explaining exactly how and is it conceivable, is it feasible that you would get the Hartford Whalers back in town. And again, there's always so much, I find, emotion talking about a team that's and again they say don't say defunct, because that means it doesn't exist and actually moved, but I think for all intents and purposes, if you live in that area, it would feel defunct to you, like something is gone. And Dave, I mean, you can speak to this a little bit. If you've ever been in a city that had a major league sports franchise leave,
it's the worst feeling in the world.
So what happens when you're in Winnipeg when they end up going down to Phoenix? Do you feel cheated? Are you more angry? Are you hurt? Or are you all those things?
I think you're everything. Because, you just remember, it's almost like, and you can't even sit there and say the air was let out of the balloon, because it's much bigger than that. I mean, think of it from a perspective of, it's almost like the Jets are the foundation of a city, just like the Maple Leafs are a foundation of this city. There's a lot of other distractions, but that's the main event. You could say the same thing about the Flames, the Oilers, the Canucks, teams like that. You lose, and I'm going to be careful with this, but you almost lose your identity as a city.
I think that's fair.
It seems harsh though, doesn't it? Because life goes on, life continues to go on, but it's almost like.
Well, you feel cheated a little bit,
You do. Well, you grow up with it, and, they left when I was in my 20s. So, my childhood wasn't robbed, but there was 15 years of kids in that area that didn't have an NHL team to support, which was it's kind of sad. And I was almost like, I actually hope Carolina is the team that returns to Hartford because of the history aspect, because if I could do this again, I wish the Coyotes would have returned to the Winnipeg area,
because that really is
the history
the
book,
team.
right?
Okay, let me just before we get to John, before he calls in, if we can sneak it in. Here's the last game actually of the Hartford Whalers. So this is Kevin Dineen's team. They actually play the Brass Bonanza on this thing. So if you're watching it, it's kind of interesting. Well, actually, you know what? Let's go to Brass Bonanza. Can you find me Brass Bonanza? Play that, because this is John calling in here. Now, yeah, go ahead. This, of course, Brass Bonanza, Hartford Whalers song.
Got it.
And now we will go to, I guess we would say councilman, also a lawyer in the area. We go to John Q. Gale. Good afternoon, John.
Well, is it good afternoon there?
Almost. Hey, John, when I see 11 o'clock as an Irish person, it's afternoon.
Okay. I'm with you. Good afternoon. Is this Mike?
This is Mike. So thanks so much, John, for joining us here on rawmikeRichards.com. And I got to say, the response on Twitter that we have had is really quite extraordinary, which just goes to tell you of all the teams that have moved on from their particular, I would say, city of origin. I don't know if there's greater emotion than I feel, and maybe even surprisingly so, when you bring up the name the Hartford Whalers.
And you're absolutely right, and we back that up with some actual data and statistics. I think in my article I quoted from both Reebok and from I forget if it was ESPN, but on the strength of the logo and the fact that it still sells 20 years later, it's somewhat mystifying, really, since that the team left here because they didn't like the attendance. And so, you have to wonder, well, if people weren't going to the games, where's all this love come from? But it's there. It's there, and it's real, and it hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
John, sort of the logistics of it, and again, when you get in discussions of the taxpayers, would there be monies coming from the households of those areas to support a professional team? It always brings up such strong emotions. You get sort of the example I use is the breads, not circuses kind of feel to it. So if I'm looking at you as being on the council for the city of Hartford, being from that area, do you think that there is a real possibility that people wouldn't mind paying? I want to say it was in the area of like $250 per household that you figure could actually bring this thing in?
I worked it out. It's $274 per capita. So it's just some simple math, but I ended up doing a nice spreadsheet on it, where I took the cost of the team, and I just pegged it at what Forbes said was the value of the team. Since they have the lowest attendance records right now in the NHL, perhaps the value has gone down. I don't know. But if we work with the Forbes number and we then just divide it by the population of of Central Connecticut, that works out to $274 a person. Some towns, Connecticut is 169 towns. We have no county government, so we're dealing with all these little communities. In my area, it's 38 towns, and the smallest of those towns would have to pay $800,000 to be an owner of the Whalers. That doesn't seem like a lot. The larger of those towns, West Hartford, would have to pay $18 million as a town. That's a pretty good-sized number, but just to put it into some perspective, towns routinely bond for that kind of money. You pay it out over 20 years like you would a mortgage, and your monthly payment, your yearly payment rather, on the town side, fits nicely into a budget. So it's probably a very affordable thing if people had the will to do it. But I threw it out there as a provocative idea, not as something that I'm realistically out there promoting. Certainly, if there was a groundswell of support, and there certainly has been a groundswell. I mean, there's certainly a lot of, like you said, a lot of social media action on it. But if there was that groundswell of support, it's something that the towns actually could potentially do. It's not that big a financial killer, but they're coming up with the money themselves.
That's interesting, John, and great talking to you once again. So your article's in the Hartford Courant. You bring up a really good point about the will to do it. What has been the response of the article, and what would be technically, say somebody wants to move forward with this, what would be the next step in trying to purchase the former team?
I would say the next step to follow my model would be several of the civic leaders in these various towns would have to get together, either mayors, first selectmen, or their emissaries, convene a meeting, and they could do it under the auspices of our regional group, the Capital Region Council of Governments that I mentioned. So that would be the next step. The response to my to this proposal has been wide-ranging, all over. There's on the Hartford Courant's website and Hartford Courant's Facebook page where they posted the article. We got nearly 1,000 likes, 300 comments, and 200 shares, which for an article in a local newspaper is pretty good. The comments, of course, I mean, there are some people who want to string me up and run me out of town. I'm vilified. I'm crazy. I'm just another liberal tax and spender. All sorts of things that some people, it's very clear, didn't even read the article because they have no concept of what I've suggested. And then there's a whole host of other people on the other side that are like, great idea, sign me up. Where do I send my $274? I had one guy call me offering to send me $2,500 to, I'll seed the pot. So it's a tremendous amount of support, but, the usual cadres of naysayers.
We're in conversation with John Q. Gale from Hartford, sits on the city council. He's a lawyer in that area, talking about the, possibilities of what it would take to have Hartford back as the Whalers. And John, just curious, in looking sort of the model that you have made, is it fair to say that it is similar, at least in philosophy, that what you see in terms of community ownership like the Green Bay Packers?
Yes, I mean, certainly that's the model that I used. I don't actually know the details of the ownership of the Packers, but the community pride that ownership in the Packers brings out is very apparent. And I was struck by this last fall watching some of the playoff games when I'm sitting there watching a Green Bay game, and you see all these rabid Green Bay fans, and it's just in the scheme of things, it's a fairly small town. But boy, do they support that team, and that just got me thinking. This is the kind of thing that could help a franchise like the Whalers, which left because of attendance. Well, now you got buy-in. Now you're owners, and it certainly worked for Green Bay, and I would like to think it would work here.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And you know what? Even reading the article, John, and we do recommend everybody out there checking it out. The article is bigger than the Hartford Whalers themselves. And I think you kind of pinpointed it when you said it's investing in the emotional well-being of our community. And it's not just the Whalers, but anything like that does bring the community together. And I've seen it firsthand when I used to live in Winnipeg, and the Jets actually left, and to see the Jets return, what it did to revitalize a lot of the businesses in the area as well. Yeah, and we know that there are statistics out there as to communities that have a major sports franchise, and Hartford actually is one of the largest metropolitan areas in North America without a major sports franchise. And it shows where we could use the boost.
Yeah, and talk about that, John, because look, for years the stereotype was the money that existed in Connecticut, the Hartford sort of Thurston Howell the third kind of guy that has some summer places, and I think what I'm at least getting from your article, and there's some real serious economic issues that the state has in central Connecticut where you could use the boost because there hasn't been a whole bunch of growth.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that when I look at it, in part, there's been sort of a dramatic change. Maybe saying it over the last 20 years that makes it less dramatic, but I do feel that our millennial population are really turning to cities. And, some of this started with your big cities like New York and Los Angeles 20, 25 years ago, and it's just been accelerating where not only young people, but people of all kinds are now adopting city life and moving to cities. And so around the country, around the countries, include Canada in this, those cities that have vitality, have done interesting and exciting things, have made themselves welcome mats for young people, are really on the cutting edge. They're generating excitement. And here in Connecticut, going back to something I said earlier, we don't have regional government, and that's become a real problem because we're not able to act regionally to move as a cohesive unit. Instead, we have 3 population centers around Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport, and most of our folks in the state run away from those centers instead of embracing them. And what's the net result? Well, we've seen General Electric, which had its headquarters in Connecticut in a suburban community, which was a fine model for many, many years, decided, you know what, they have to go where the action is. So they up and left and went to Boston. And they didn't leave Connecticut because of any tax problems. They left Connecticut because Boston's an exciting place, and they want to be in a place where they can attract talent. Just in the last couple of months, United Technologies, which is headquartered here in East Hartford, Connecticut, right across the river from where I sit, major corporation, just announced that they're moving one of their head divisions down to New York City. Again, they want to be where the action is. So I'm feeling that, in sensing that in Connecticut, for us to be where the action is, we've got to invest in our cities. We've got to, and this was my article was sort of one way of saying that. Look, folks, let's try to get together and invest and make our cities these vibrant places where business wants to go.
And I agree. I mean, John, if you're talking about motivation, it has to come within, and you can't just sit around and hope for something to change. You have to make that change. And even as bold as the article probably came across, and for those that want to roll their eyes a little bit, it's got to start somewhere, even if it's just an idea. And I think that's what that article did. And I think the excitement and a lot of the positive feedback that you got, as you said, you're not saying that this is an actual sort of legitimate proposal, but at least it's something that can be the genesis in which you can, maybe go forward and at least explore the idea. So congratulations to you. And I think for a lot of people that are watching and listening to the show today, I think they got their fingers crossed because I know they'd like to see it.
Well, thank you very much.
John Q. Gale is a member of the City Council in Hartford, and he joined us here today on rawmike.richards.com simply just to say, it is, a possibility of what could happen. And when you look at community ownership, which for years, Saskatchewan Roughriders, Green Bay Packers,
those are the 2 big ones,
right? If there's models out there that show, what are the riders? What's the second word? It's rider pride.
It is.
It's rider pride.
And
so
now they have themselves a brand new building, and they're ecstatic over the moon about this one. And
see, I got to get to that one, and I still have not sat at the new Winnipeg Stadium.
Well, that's a fantastic facility as well, and it almost seems that we're looking at a new age of CFL as far as new buildings being placed everywhere. And if they're not new, they're people are renovating. And it all started too when the Montreal Alouettes decided they were going to move out and actually go outside, and it's kind of revitalized that population base as well and their love for CFL football.
So what did you make of that conversation? You can get involved by sending myself a message on Twitter. Tweet me at rawmike.richards.com or at Dave Bastel. What did you make of the idea? Because that's really what this is. This isn't a formal proposal to the NHL. It's actually far from it. It's an article. But in its understanding of what they want to do for the community, is that something, for instance, if it was your community, would you be coughing up the $270 per household?
I'd be one of those guys phoning him up and saying, I'll give more to help out.
$2,500 would help out. Well, when the Jets, when it's an understanding the Jets are going to be back in Winnipeg, when they had that ticket drive.
Yes.
That was it 45 minutes? It was what
it was less than that. It was about 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Yeah. Sold out basically their allotted season tickets because they don't want to. They could have sold the entire building, but you always want the walk-up crowd,
of course.
too.
It's got to be accessible.
And for everybody that actually missed on it, it almost outnumbers the people that got it by like 5-1. That was the kind of area where you kind of wish the makers of the MTS Center would have had the foresight to say, you know what, we got the state-of-the-art arena. Why not make it big enough attendance-wise just in case? Because the 15,000 in Winnipeg, could have easily been 18.5 or 19.5, which would have made a significant difference.
But you got to think that Quebec City, should there be...
It's ready to go.
Talk of expansion.
Yep.
I realize, if someone had said to me like 10 years ago, there's a possibility of either Quebec or Las Vegas. Well, Vegas would be fucking great because I'm a degenerate. I do all the things that you're not supposed to do. I'm going to the Spearmint Rhino. I'm lying about whether I'm married or not. I'm lying about my ability to play professional hockey. I'm just lying, and then I'm going and I'm gambling and I'm boozing and whatever else I could do, and then the hockey game. Like, do you think even culturally this thing is going to fit into the city and what, like as they like to say, the fabric of the city? It's just so bizarre. But you're going to see NFL football in that city. In my wildest dreams, would never have thought going to Sin City because there's just so much temptation and bad stuff that can happen. But apparently, we're over that now.
It's going to be a destination spot for, okay, when do you want to go to Vegas? Well, I want to go to Vegas when the Maple Leafs are in town. We're going to combine this, and this. You watch. As soon as the Maple Leafs go down there, or the Jets, or the Calgary Flames, the Canucks, huge, whatever it is, there's going to be a significant base of those ticket sales from traveling fans because that's the place you want to travel to.
I mean, think about it, Dave. Would you want, and this goes for, not just for people in Edmonton or Oilers fans, but if you're going down to Vegas, you plan that you're going to make this Vegas trip, you can go to Vegas and see Connor McDavid?
Check marks.
Well, you're doing it.
Absolutely you are.
It's like, you want to see Seinfeld or Sebastian Maniscalco or Jim Gaffigan or whatever the band is of choice. Maybe it's Celine Dion. Sorry, Dave. Didn't mean to...
no, it isn't.
I think we've talked about this earlier. I know Russell all of a sudden, he's excited this morning.
It's Cheap Trick. I want to see Cheap Trick.
Cheap Trick.
Vegas, yeah.
Cheap Trick. So, again, if you want to get in the conversation, here's one from, again, the hashtag Fire Bergevin. I wonder how he feels. Vegas won't last. Brutal idea. Nobody wants to watch hockey when you can do all the other Vegas things. And I think...
Oh, come on.
I think that when I'm looking at this, I'm like, yeah, I understand that sentiment because I am mostly all about the bad things. Would I go to a hockey game and pull myself out of the Moonlight Ranch or whatever they call it, the Bunny Ranch? Russell, would you give up? Okay, here's your choice. Russell Graham, who's he's called himself the technical director.
It's a good title.
If you have, and you're in, hold on, let me get some.
You're in Vegas for 3 nights. 2 nights, 3 nights?
No, you're there for 3 nights.
Okay, you're there for 3 nights.
Let me just get some proper music for this question. Hold on.
Remember this. Yeah, I'll keep on setting
it's not the shit
up.
music. It's dramatic music.
Oh, dramatic music. Okay, so the game starts at 7:00. You're going to be out of this facility by 10:00 at the latest. So a lot of things don't heat up in Vegas until.
See, that's a good point though too. That people are like one or the other. They're like, yeah, but the game starts at 10:00. People don't even go to the clubs till 10:30.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because the clubs aren't going to close at 1 or 2, and there's always something to do after 2 if that's what you want to do. Trust me, I've been in poker tournaments at 4 or 5 in the morning. These things happen.
I miss the 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, Dave.
My brother loves those. Oh, he has some stories. Ooh. Oh.
You fight anybody in those ones?
No fighting in that one, but it's just let's just say the mentality of the table and the decision-making process is a lot different at 5 in the morning than it would be at like 7 at night.
That's why, you know what, it's funny. want to talk to Jamie Dawick. He's the owner of the Toronto Rock.
Speaking of poker players,
He goes to the big tournament now.
He does.
I mean, it's almost unbelievable to make it to the big table, and I think he's been within like a day or so.
Okay.
Which,
That's,
when you're talking
that's
about the
phenomenal.
worlds,
Yeah.
that is huge.
That's really big.
Ask about that. So, Russell, the question is, you have a chance to go to, and let's just say it's Spearmint Rhino, which I know you love. I know you dream about. I know it's on your bucket list. And are we calling it the Black Knights? What do they call them officially?
The Golden Knights.
The Golden Knights.
Yes.
It's the Black Knights. Anyway,
There's so many nicknames.
they shouldn't. If you're gonna be like Army, then just call it the Black Knights. Everyone's fine with that. Would you make a choice to leave the strip joint and go to the game, or do you feel within yourself that you would actually go to the game and then hit Spearmint Rhino afterwards?
I think I would do both.
You would do both.
Yay,
I would do both.
good decision.
That's a very
there we
solid
go.
decision.
There we go.
Game first.
Game first.
Spearmint Rhino after.
You know what? I'll even throw this into the mix, Russell. You could go to the Spearmint Rhino, then go to the game, and then go back to the Rhino.
It's a veteran move, actually, is what that is.
Not a bad idea.
Here's what I'm doing. I'm going from the pool, wherever you happen to be.
Caesar's Palace is fantastic.
So
pools.
I'm going from the pool. I'm going to the Spearmint Rhino mid to late afternoon.
Okay.
You know, just find out who the bouncers are, take a look at the VIP, kind of check it out. And they'll say, can I help you, sir? I'm going, you mean Your Royal Highness? The Prince of Ireland? They have that? Yeah, they do. They have that.
They do.
And don't look at me face like that. Terrible person. Then I would go to the game for maybe a period. I'd make a couple of wagers, over, under, maybe in the first period, or who's going to score. See either it happened or didn't, and then I'm back to the Spearmint Rhino. But then comes a decision. Would you go to a Moonlight Ranch? Would you go to one of the ranches to meet one of your dream girls? The girls that you think about? The girls that you've seen it on your computer in your room? That you've texted to, you've tweeted to?
That's a tough one, because then you want to go to the casino after and play some poker, so you got to
you'd
make
be
that decision.
More of a casino guy than you would the Moonlight Ranch or the
Well, I mean, if I've already gone to the Spearmint Rhino, then maybe, yeah.
Yeah, but this one's a little more.
But
this one's a little more body contact. I mean, you can the other one, but I'm just saying, just in your world, how it is.
Yeah.
With when you have your teddy bears all in a circle, you give them all names and stuff. Russell, stop talking in your bedroom. I'm gonna leave me alone. I'm doing a show.
I see Russell setting up like a Phil Donahue type studio where he walks around talking to all of them.
Do you think touching is right? We're going to touch the Sally in New Jersey. Russell! No, Russell's not that way at all.
No,
I'm that way. You're watching and or listening to Raw Mike Richards on rawmikeRichards.com. Also, of course, you can podcast later today, and that's hopefully what you have done on iTunes, courtesy of our friends at Henry's Cameras, also Avi Studios, and as always, our good friends at Eggplant Pictures. What have we talked about this morning? It's been sort of dominated by the Whalers conversation.
By the way, some Twitter questions out there about the Hartford Civic Center. It actually does exist. It's called the XL Center. So it's an insurance place that bought the naming rights. So the Civic Center actually exists. It was made back in 1975.
See, but the irony is that it used to be sort of ridiculed, and the stereotype was that everyone that lived in Connecticut was, sort of the chin down, a little bit wealthier type of people. And now they're saying that there's been no growth and companies are leaving because there's nothing there, which is remarkable. Here's a couple of tweets. Here's Jake back in here today. Odds are that Yager is on the Vegas roster next year? He goes, so if that's the case, are we going to go to an after party with him? Okay. Well, that would be a dream come true.
Yager screams of captain of the Vegas Golden Knights. He'd have to be.
Can you imagine if he actually, at some point, because this is what's going to be interesting with the entry draft and everything else that's going on this year. Like, it's a bit of a fire sale.
Yes.
So if you're not protected.
It's not the worst thing in the
world. This might be the year that you don't want to be protected. If you're walking down, they go, well, like they're going to do this. Like you're trying out for a junior team. Yager, you're not protected. Really? So I'm available for Vegas? You're saying I could be a Vegas guy? But Yager in Vegas?
Ooh.
Outstanding. Here's another one from Toro Habs fan. Only have so much money after all the other stuff. Who has the cash for hockey? That is true. I wonder what the average ticket's going to be.
You get a lot of comps, though. If you play it right, because he makes a good point, but if you play it right, you go to the right hotel, a lot of times somebody's going to be sitting there going, upgrade to this size room, get tickets. Because a
Sort of
lot
like
of
everything else in Vegas, the city lives
completely
on.
is. I mean, if you go to Vegas and you don't get yourself something free, then you're not doing it right.
You've done Vegas wrong.
Because trust me, you should be able to get a lot for free. And we're talking about covers. We're talking about buffet dinners. VIP in the actual hotel that you're at, because a lot of the hotels have their own clubs. If you're not doing any of this, then you're not playing the right cards.
And if you're someone that's a regular that spends enough, and you're quote unquote classified as a whale.
Correct.
I mean, that's how these guys are going to the big boxing matches,
and
big
this is
UFC matches.
And if you're a whale in Vegas, that's good. If you're a whale somewhere else, you're Sean Levine.
Yeah, that's just fat.
Sorry,
I think is what that means. But really
facts.
Yeah, really interested in sort of how this is going to play out a little bit. And does, I guess sometimes does it make the league, and I'm talking about the NHL now, does it make it better? Getting Hartford in the league, does it make it better? And I think that will almost be a generational thing. But I can say that getting Quebec as the Nordique back in the league, having a professional team in Quebec City, I truly believe that makes the league better.
Correct. 100%.
Do you think Hamilton would have worked?
Yes, I think they would have.
Yeah.
I think Hamilton would have worked. I think a team in Markham would have worked. I think a team that shared the same facility as the Toronto Maple Leafs would have worked. This marketplace could easily support another franchise. It would be its weak sister, though. You
that
sit
was the
there,
thing
but that's just the way it is.
In Markham, when they really kind of pushed for that, there were those that thought they had a legitimate chance simply because they were basing it on the model of, Jets Giants.
Yes.
Yankees Mets.
That's exactly it.
Saying in the greater Toronto area, in the GTA, that they could support two teams, because that's how you end up finding. And again, I talk about the generational thing. If you've tried for years, or Yankees or so on, when the Mets come in what was it, 67?
Yeah, a little bit earlier than that. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
So all of a sudden, immediately, for the most part, they become the younger fan. And I think having the younger generation as fans isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Nope, completely agree. And I think it would have worked easily. And who knows? Maybe it's part of a future date, right? You sit there and you go, Air Canada Centre is one of the busiest arenas in North America.
They're just not dirty enough. You know what I mean? Like, the only problem with the new buildings, they don't have that rink scunge and that smell
like
that I
that
love.
Joe Louis smell.
Like you go to the Joe and
the
now you
Nassau
can't.
Coliseum smell. Yeah.
The Nassau Coliseum smell. Maybe some other stuff was happening down there. Maybe Vinny didn't pay the bills. You got to pay the bill. There might have been some other stuff. But what I think is, when people say, well, what about going back to Nassau County? Well, the people voted that they didn't want to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was a vote, and the vote was no. So in some ways, you're not necessarily, if I'm looking at the emotions of where you would go, I don't know if they're that welcome to go back to Nassau County if that's what their choice is.
Do you know what? We'll talk about that with Clark Gillies tomorrow. He'll have a better beat on that. He lives in Garden City, which is just kind of outside of that little area. It's actually, you would love Garden City, New York. It's fantastic. It's about 30 minutes away from Belmont, and it's probably
that's right too. Yeah.
And it's probably about 15-20 minute drive to the actual arena itself, because it's funny. Nassau Coliseum has this enormous parking lot, and there is a Marriott hotel that is just off the parking lot. So a lot of the media that are covering would take that hotel. Bad move. You stay in Garden City. It's a much better facility area, a much better area just to do anything, and you're only 15 minutes away from the arena itself.
Well, tomorrow, tell you what's coming.
Just become best friends. Yep. You want to go do karate in the garage? Yep. It's time.
I'd like to thank John Q. Imagine you work for a city council and you're John Q. something.
He's got it.
I mean, he's got it. It's going to happen. So I was really happy that he joined us here today from the Hartford City Council. And, of course, as a lawyer, the article in The Current about whether you want to see and can you get the Hartford Whalers back in Hartford.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Coming up tomorrow, Hall of Famer Clark Gillies. You think he's got stories?
He does.
He's got stories. Also, Ed Bouchette going to join us from Pittsburgh and talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, what happens this year. Have yourself a great day on behalf of myself, Dave Bastel, and Russell Graham. Have yourself a great day.